If you're a comic book reader like me, then you've probably come across this guy's work. Now, just who is this guy with the magnificent beard, you may be asking? Well, it's none other than Eisner Award-winning Mitch Gerads, one of the best comic book artists, in my humble opinion, who's known for working on Strange Adventures, Batman, Heroes in Crisis, and Mr. Miracle. Well, just what is it that makes Mitch the best? Today, let's dive in and take a deeper look at his style and see what you and I can learn from him. The other day, I sat down and gathered a bunch of Mitch's work, and I imported them into my iPad to write down and take notes and see what I could observe. So let's take a look now, and as you can see here, it's quite a mess. But after observing and taking a lot of notes, there were four main things that I noticed that really make Mitch's style stand out from other comic artists you may know. One of the first things I noticed is that instead of going for a clean and traditional kind of line art, Mitch goes for a very sketchy and almost grungy kind of line art. And as you can see here, this is very different than what you normally see in comic books today. This is kind of a side note, but I really like how there's always a lot of loose scribbles and rendering that can be found on all of his characters, and in some cases, even in the backgrounds. And another thing that I observed is that Mitch tends to use thicker line art in different areas of his piece. So if you take a look at Mr. Miracle's cape here, for example, you can see that the line art for the capes here is very different than the line art for the face. There's actually a pretty significant difference now that you look at it. Because the cape is thicker than the head, it almost looks like Mitch pasted the cape on top of Mr. Miracle. Which, that kind of detail I really like. It adds a lot of dimension. So how can you apply this to your art? Well, maybe instead of doing clean and traditional inks, experiment with maybe more of a pencil brush, try looser strokes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and not have it super clean. Me personally, I found that the Procreate 6B brush is very similar to Mitch's line art brush and could be useful for you. And another thing that really stands out to me the more I look at his work is just how simple his colors are. If you just ignore all of the halftones and the details and effects he has going on here, take a look at how simple his colors are. For example here, his colors are basically like this. Again, these are just rough scribbles, but overall, hopefully you get the point. He uses a lot of flat colors in his work. And again, this isn't really something you see too much of nowadays. And in comics, there's a lot of airbrushed and super detailed coloring work. Not that there's anything wrong, of course, with the airbrushed and super detailed colors. In fact, some of my favorite colorists color super detail. This particular coloring style just stands out from everything else you normally see. Now, let's talk about the colors themselves. When looking at this panel, I wondered how Mitch's colors compared to Jack Kirby's original colors. So, I quickly color picked them and see how they compared. So these colors here are Kirby's original colors that you can see right here that are used a lot in the retro comic books. And these are Mitch's colors. There's a pretty big difference, right? But when you initially look at this, it looks super saturated. Especially in other panels, like right here. It looks incredibly saturated, but in reality, it's pretty desaturated compared to how bright Kirby's colors actually are. And so, me being the absolute nerd that I am, I wanted to take a look at the math behind the colors and see how they compared. So I have Procreate open here, and after doing a bit of quick math, I found that Mitch's colors are roughly about 77% saturated and have a brightness of about 84%. Whereas Kirby's, as you can see here, they're all pretty much at 100% brightness and saturation, which is why they pop and they look almost neon. Versus Mitch's, they're just slightly desaturated and slightly darker, which is what makes the contrast. So these are just subtle differences that blend all of the colors together. Because they're not as saturated and bright and they're closer together on the color wheel than Kirby's colors, it allows them to blend together and look a bit more harmonious. So again, remember, these are just very rough averages, and feel free to use this as a baseline, but just push the colors however direction you want. You feel it looks too saturated, make it more saturated. You feel it looks too dark, make it lighter. Just have fun with it. I actually got the opportunity to meet Mitch a couple months back, and he gave me a really good tip. The tip he gave me was to, when drawing characters, to always use color holds. And in case you don't know what a color hold is, it's basically when you color the line art so it matches the flat colors of the drawing. Let me show you an example. For this example, I'll be using a promo art that I used for Tulip, my original comic book coming out later this year. And this right here is normally how comic books or art in general is inked. You can see black lines everywhere. Alright, take a look at this image and then see how it compares to this one. See the difference? So Mitch, he doesn't use black to shade. He actually uses a shade of purple to shade his characters. And then for the skin part, he uses a orangey skin tone, ink just the areas of the character that have skin. So why does he do this? Because they're not just solid black that separates them, and they're actual darker shades of the colors used in the final drawing. It allows them to blend together and look a bit more harmonious than the cold black would. One of the most eye-catching things about Mitch's style is his use of effects that can only be achieved with digital art. He uses a large variety of effects such as noise, paper overlay effect, glitches, splatter, and halftone, which are my personal favorite. So now I'll quickly show you how you can apply these effects in your art. For this, I'll be using Procreate, but in theory, any digital art program should do the trick. So Mitch uses halftone primarily to shade his work. So this isn't how he shades it all. In fact, he shades something a bit like this. Big difference, isn't there? So I'll show you how you can do this real quick. First, create a new layer above wherever you're trying to shade. Color it with a light gray. Set the gray layer to clip over your object you want to shade. And then you can set it either to color burn or multiply. So for this, I'll just be using color burn. Then you just apply halftones to your liking. That's it. You're done. Now onto the noise. Mitch uses noise very lightly in his work, so this part is really just up to your personal taste. Now to do this in Procreate, just simply click on the magic wand button and hit the noise, and just scroll to your liking. Me personally, I think about 4 or 5% looks good, but again, it's up to you. Now for the paper-like texture, you can just grab any picture of a faded, old, brown, crumply paper and just import it into your drawing program. Then what you do is you set the layer to clip over your object, and then what you would do is you just set the layer mode to soft light and then apply it to about 24 or 25%, although in this case I would say about 40% looks best. Again, it's all about these little details that really make up Mitch's style. And lastly, for splatter, you can alternate between Procreate's flicks and splatter brushes. Either one will do the trick, or you can try combining both. But just make sure that the splatters are the same color as your line art. If you look closely in Mitch's style, all of the splatters used in his art and his panel are all the same purple color, the purple burgundy color as his line art. So just splatter them when necessary. Usually try to do it close to the line art, so by borders or anywhere close to the line art, that's the best place to splatter in my opinion. It just adds to the transition between the line art and the colors. So then just clip it and you're good to go. So now that we know the defining features of Mitch's style, let's see if we can apply this to our work and see if it changes anything. Most importantly, if it saves us any time. So now, let's see how long this drawing took in total, and see if Mitch's influence and features saved us any time. And it took 4 hours and 59 minutes. That's actually really incredible, especially because, you know, it once took me 18 hours to complete a drawing, so yeah. But this in total is just really a fraction of that, and on top of it, I had a blast working with these methods. I have to say I really loved how this turned out. You know, it turned out much better than I could have ever expected. I do have to say though, it was very freeing to work a bit more loosely and not be tied down into realism, which is something that I personally am trying to move away from. And if you like my drawing as well, SUPRISE is incoming. I'm actually now selling 4x6 prints of these very artworks on my Etsy page for just $10. So go check it out. Well, that's it for today's video. Do you think I should turn this into a series? Let me know down in the comments. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.